Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. So this morning, it's Friday, and usually I spend the Friday morning preparing for the khutbah, kind of reviewing, going over what I plan to talk about. And last week I had covered or had used as a source for the khutbah the latter portion of the 28th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Qasas, which translates as the chapter relating to stories, moral stories. And so in that last portion of the surah, Allah presents to us a figure from the tradition of Bani Israel. And that figure is Qarun. Qarun, I think in the Bible, is referred to as Korah. And he is said to be min qawmi Musa. He's from the family of Moses, or the people of Moses, of Musa alayhi salam. And what really just kind of, the reason why this stood out to me is that I was reviewing the verse where Allah talks about Qarun, and He says, وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْكُنُوزِ مَا إِنَّ مَفَاتِحَهُ لَتَنُوءُ بِالْعُصْبَةِ أُولِي الْقُوَّةِ. And that we gave Qarun treasures, of which just simply the mafatih, simply the keys, would be a great burden for anybody to lift from those who were strong. And so I was reading from Imam Ash-Shawkani's tafsir, rahimahullah, a great latter-day mufassir, whose tafsir is considered one of the most important works of commentary on the Quran, even though he came obviously much closer to our time. He is from the latter day period. And what I like about Imam Ash-Shawkani is that he really likes to present to you and highlight to you and open up for you the language of the Quran, particularly through referencing buyut of shi'r. So he likes to reference, these, lines of poetry. He was a great, aside from being a great mufassir, a great commentator on the Quran, he was really like a nahwi. He was like a person who really understood the Arabic language astoundingly well. But the point that I'm going to get to isn't so much about the tafsir in and of itself, or the language in and of itself, but it's this line of poetry that he cites that really, I don't know, it was a confluence of things. So back up about 24 hours or so ago, I happened to come across, yes, I still go to Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I still voyage there from time to time, sometimes just to post things that we're doing at Middle Ground. And so when I opened up my X account, I happened to see a post from a friend of mine, Sheikh Joe Bradford, many of you will be familiar with. And in this post, he was commenting on let's say, a young, enthusiastic student of knowledge based in the UK who was making the proclamation that the only people of the Sunnah, the only people of Ahl Sunnah wa Jama'ah were the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyya. These are two schools of quote-unquote Islamic theological speculative thought, two schools of creedal thought. And I appreciated Sheikh Joe's comments on it, and I made a small comment myself in which I had said that, it was really unfortunate that back in the 80s and the 90s, for those of us who were alive and Muslim back then that can remember, there were what they called like the Aqidah wars. And they were done by also kind of overly enthusiastic and not so well studied students of the Salafi tradition. That's the tradition that I came into Islam through. And they, of course, launched their attacks, on people that did not subscribe to Salafiyah. And then fast forward many years later, even though I have a great appreciation, I still read books from Salafi scholars. I am no longer a person that would describe himself as a follower of Salafiyah, which is not to say that I don't greatly prize the treasure trove and the things left to us in the guidance of the early Muslims, the Salaf. But, so in this I just said, wow, it's really sad that now we're seeing a flip where you have students who are of the Ash'ari or Maturidi persuasion now not only casting out the Salafis, but apparently the Atharis as well. And so those of us that have studied Aqidah or adhere to Aqidah according to the understanding of Imam Ahmed, may Allah have mercy on him, this was really disappointing. And so I had essentially said, wow, I made the comment, this is really sad to see now, instead of meeting in the middle of the Quran and Sunnah, now we're just meeting in the middle of fighting and arguing, and this person is not on the correct this or the correct that. And that isn't to say that obviously a person cannot have incorrect belief. that goes without saying. But to bring it back to this line that Imam Ashokani that he cites for us, and it made me think about tradition. So let's just look really quickly. What does Imam Ashokani write? He quotes the poet as saying, وَقَالَ عَشَعَرْ إِنَّا وَجَدَنَا خَلَفًا بِئْسَ الْخَلَفَ. That we found ourselves a successor, and what a horrible successor that successor was. عَبَدًا إِذَا نَاءَ بِالْحِمْلِ وَقَفْ. And that whenever the slave attempts to rise with the burden that they are carrying, they stop, or they perhaps even drop it. And so this got me thinking about our tradition, right? We live now in the 15th century Hijrah, and so we have over 1,400 years of tradition. We have 1,400 years of scholarship, musings, writings, reflections. And this is a great burden. Now, burden doesn't necessarily have to be bad, but it's without a doubt that tradition can definitely be a burden. And so what is upon you when you have a burden is that you have to figure out what is required of you to lift it, what is required of you to move it. And that I feel like, as I wrote a friend of mine this morning, like in lieu of getting about the task of figuring how can we pick this thing up. It's like you ever see one of those strongman competitions, and they're all incredibly strong, but then they will give them a task that even for them is difficult, like one of those gigantic Atlas stones. And so you can't just pick it up. Like you got to figure it out. You got to grapple with it and wrestle with it and take it up in stages, and And I feel like this is kind of like what tradition is, that, you have to grapple with the language. And I don't mean just the Arabic language. Yes, you have to become proficient in the Arabic language, but you also have to become proficient with the aqwal and the alfaz and the kitaba and the kutab, right? You have to be familiar with the language of those people, how they wrote, how they discussed, the ins and outs of their thinking. And that's a great burden, if you think about somebody that lived perhaps in, say, like 200, 300, or 400 years after the Hijrah, well, they only had 200, 300, 400 years of tradition that they had to wrestle with. We, on the other hand, we have a lot of tradition that we have to wrestle with. And then the Ummah itself has been through a lot in these last, the intervening, 1,400 years. And I find it disappointing that, as the poet says, that we found ourselves a successor. And by here, it made me think of ourselves. We are that وَبِئْسَ الْخَلَفِ. We are that really despicable, very poor successor. For those, whether they're of the Asha'ira or the Salafiyya or whatever, that love to invoke the pious predecessors, the Salaf, I don't think that, people are so busy trying to use them to bludgeon. And we see an example of this today, right? Using somebody or something as a means of cajoling and of opportunism. So this guy, Charlie Kirk, gets assassinated, and now essentially, whether it's the Zionists or whether it's the GOP, they have all rushed to essentially try to make some type of utility out of his death. And they've manufactured really like kind of an abomination out of it. And I feel like, are we doing the same thing with this tradition that we have? We are not doing much to facilitate the learning. And I'll hold myself accountable. I try, but I feel like as a whole, we could be doing a much better job to facilitate the learning and the development of Muslims, of their religion. And so I think in a video I had made just a few days ago, I had talked about the importance as a student, like as just a regular Joe Schmo Muslim, because every Joe Schmo Muslim should be, you are a student, just to whatever your capacity is. And that you should be diligent in seeking out teachers that have the capacity to not just, teach you neat things or teach you pony tricks, but that they can imbue to you and impart to you knowledge, skills. And I think that's where alhamdulillah, I really do thank Allah Ta'ala that my teachers were teachers that imparted knowledge, skills to me, and not just knowledge, so that I was able to then learn myself. And so going back to this idea of, tradition is a burden. It's heavy. It's cumbersome. But that doesn't mean that it's all bad. So you tend to have either, two camps in the modern period. The Mu'asirin, we have this tendency to either, tradition is all this oppressive weight, so let's just jettison it all together and just make up things on our own. And we'll just apply reason or whatever that we want to apply to the religion, and we'll just kind of come up with our own thing. Or there are those that, I could respect somebody that really wanted to maintain the positions, the mawaqif of those that came before. But then that requires great diligency on your part to really learn them and know them. And then, to be quite honest, that isn't sufficient. We have to be able to then use that tradition to grapple with the things that we're facing in the time that we live in now. And so there was something about this line of poetry that, inna wajadana, we found a khalfan wa bi'sa al-khalaf. Like, just such an extraordinary line. We found a successor, but how horrible of a successor it was. It's really like a sort of self-deprecating, a way of, looking at yourself and being critical. Abadan idha na'a, when it's like, this is a person who is, they describe him as abadan, so abd could literally mean a slave or a person of devotion, whatever that it is. إِذَا نَاءَ بِالْحَمِلِ, when they try to rise up, because that is Imam al-Shawkani was commenting on the meaning of لَا تَنُوءُ بِالْعُصْبَةِ أُولِي الْخُوَّةِ. So he was commenting on the meaning of na'a in that particular verse from Surah Al-Qasas, that when the strong men of Qarun were attempting to just stand up straight, holding his treasure hoard, that even though they were those who were foremost in physical strength, they found it difficult. And so I feel that we need like a moment to sort of reset versus always react. Because I think, I don't have all the answers, but I do believe that is probably one critical part of why we are settling for not only low-hanging fruit, but really rotting fruit, because this is the fruit that has already spoiled and is falling off the tree and it's rotten. We're settling for this low-hanging fruit of argumentation, belittling and putting each other down, instead of raising each other up. And then where we do have areas for legitimate debate, that we do it with, hanana, like shafaqa. We do it with compassion and caring. Not that we look for some way. I mean, it's almost as if like the online students of knowledge have become the equivalent of ICE agents that are just rolling around looking for people to waylay and to essentially deport them out of the ummah. This is really despicable. So also, how beautiful is it that Allah Ta'ala has left us this great tradition of scholars that, even though they lived perhaps in the case of Imam al-Shawkani a couple hundred years ago, they were still very astute, and they left us, we talked about kunuz, they left us jawahir. They left us these little gems, and we have to dig in the dirt and blow the dust off and polish them up, and they will shine a light on many things that we're dealing with today. So for the three people that will see this video, I highly encourage these students of so-called knowledge to really take a deep breath, step back, and have a little humility. I know that can be hard, because when you get imparted with a little bit of knowledge, just like, you start working out a little bit, you start feeling yourself, it can be hard to restrain yourself. But I hope that there's a way that we can turn in a different direction here, because I think the real practical downside to this is that I see a lot of Muslims today just either turned off by this, like, oh Lord, here we go, another fiqh bro who learned a little bit of alif ba ta, and now he's going to get out there and just get his Gatling gun. Or that's all that people want to see. So when you try to come and you try to actually teach something of substance, and people are like, hey, where's the UFC fight? I want to see some elbows to the head. I want to see some violence. I want to see the drama. And neither of these approaches is not only going to bring benefit to our ummah or solve any problems that our ummah is facing, but there are going to actually be calamities that we will all have to face on the day of judgment when we are questioned. So I'll leave it at that. It's time to pack up and head out for Jumu'ah. Assalamu alaikum.